You stand amidst a sea of nobles, their eyes fastened on the richly adorned chamber where Lucrezia Borgia, her very name echoing with ambition and intrigue, is about to join in marriage with Alfonso d'Este. This occasion is no ordinary celebration of love. It is a carefully calculated move, a union meant to quiet past whispers and secure future power. The candlelight shimmers across the faces of courtiers, their looks a mixture of admiration and judgment, as they prepare to witness an event capable of sealing the destiny of dynasties. The atmosphere is alive with tension. Tonight is not only a wedding but performance, as Lucrezia must consummate her fate under the piercing eyes of those eager to dissect every moment. Before delving deeper into these forgotten tales of endurance and intrigue, if you enjoy exploring the untold truths of history, don't forget to press the like button and subscribe for more stories like this. And please leave a comment below sharing where you're watching from. I find it fascinating that we uncover these ancient events together, scattered across the world, yet united in curiosity about the past. In the heart of Renaissance Rome, the year 1502 unfolds with feverish anticipation. The city, its winding cobblestone streets and towering domes alive with whispers, waits for a wedding that is anything but ordinary. This day is not simply about two souls. It is a grand display where ambition, legacy, and power are woven tightly together. The air is heavy with incense and freshly cut flowers, carried over the distant rattle of horse-drawn carriages and the murmur of crowds. Rome, always a stage for the powerful and the daring, holds its breath as the Borgias prepare to cement yet another alliance. The setting is dazzling beyond compare. Palatial halls covered with gilded frescoes and rich tapestries host throngs of nobles, envoys, and courtiers from every corner of Italy and beyond. Their sharp eyes flicker beneath furrowed brows as they watch the unfolding scene. Silver candelabers burn brightly, casting golden hues upon marble floors polished to a mirror's shine. Servants in elaborate livery glide silently, balancing trays laden with spiced meats, jeweled sweets, and exotic fruits. From the raised gallery, musicians begin their melody, an intentional soundtrack for a day that is as much political theater as holy ceremony. Amidst all this splendor, the union of Lucrezia Borgia and Alfonso d'Este commands every glance. Yet beneath the surface of grandeur lies a current of tension, a reminder that this is no marriage of hearts, but a move plotted by the powerful. For weeks, the Vatican's corridors and Ferrara's courts have been alive with whispers, speculation, and strategy. The marriage is not a private vow, but a chess move on the ever-shifting board of Italian politics. Lucrezia, daughter of Pope Alexander VI, stands at the very center of the storm. At only 22, she carries herself with regal poise. Dark tresses frame her delicate face. Her pale silk gown amplifies her serene appearance, though her eyes reveal a turmoil of anticipation, uncertainty, and quiet resolve. Raised within one of Christendom's most infamous dynasties, she is no stranger to the crushing weight of expectation and the shadow of scandal. Her previous marriages, scarred by both intrigue and tragedy, left their mark. Yet today she appears not just as a bride, but as a symbol of her family's enduring grip on power. Opposite her stands Alfonso d'Este, heir to the Duchy of Ferrara. Tall, imposing, his demeanor blends solemn responsibility with restrained excitement. His noble lineage, rooted in the traditions of northern Italy's ruling elite, now intertwines with the Borgias. This alliance promises not only to strengthen Ferrara's dominion, but also to extend the reach of the Borgias far beyond Rome's walls. For a moment, Alfonso's eyes meet Lucrezia's, and in that fleeting glance rests an unspoken understanding, a recognition that they are both players in a grander scheme. The palazzo pulses with expectancy. Courtiers exchange furtive glances, whispers threading through the crowd, speculating on the outcome of this union. Some see it as Pope Alexander VI's masterstroke, a calculated effort to stabilize his papacy during a precarious time. Others regard it with suspicion, aware that beneath the glitter lies ambition potent enough to spark rivalries and betrayals. The Borgias are infamous for cunning and ruthlessness, and every guest present knows that history will judge this day not only for its splendor, but for the power it attempts to consolidate. As the vows are spoken, the grandeur cannot conceal the deeper currents flowing beneath. The chapel glimmers with frescoes of saints and martyrs, their painted eyes seemingly watching the scene unfold. The scent of wax and myrrh lingers heavily in the air, A solemn cardinal recites the prayers, his voice echoing through the vaulted space. The congregation respond with reverence, though their eyes rarely leave the bride and groom, each searching for signs of resolve, weakness, or hidden intent. Beyond the chapel, Rome itself beats with the pulse of the event. Merchants halt their trade, ears tilted toward the bells ringing from basilicas. The streets throng with spectators, hoping for a glimpse of the grand procession. For all the city, this wedding is no private affair. It is a spectacle meant to project influence across Italy and beyond. Inside, the next act of this political theater awaits. The feast. Long tables groan beneath the weight of delicacies, roasted peacocks crowned with fruit, salted fish, wheels of fresh cheese, and wine poured from crystal decanters that shimmer like rubies in the candlelight. The chamber fills with the chatter of diplomats and nobles, laughter punctuating their exchanges. Yet beneath the merriment, unease lingers. For Lucrezia, the day is a crucible. Moving gracefully among the crowd, she feels the weight of every glance, every whisper trailing behind her. Her family's legacy precedes her, the stains of poison, betrayal, and whispered sins shadowing her every step. Yet she bears herself with dignity, cloaking the storm within. This marriage is not a vow of love, but performance in which every gesture holds meaning. The stakes could not be higher. Pope Alexander VI, whose papacy is both celebrated and condemned, relies on alliances strong enough to endure Italy's unstable tides. The Borgia's enemies are numerous, and their power is both immense and fragile. This marriage is a gamble, a bold attempt to weave loyalty and influence into an unshakable network stretching across a peninsula. As the sun dips behind the horizon, stretching long shadows across Rome's ancient stones, the city seems to hold its breath, waiting to see what this union will bring as night falls upon history's stage. The wedding of Lucrezia Borgia and Alfonso d'Este is far more than a celebration. It is an occasion destined to echo through the corridors of power, reshaping alliances and redefining destinies. Beneath the glittering decor and festive melodies lies a world where love takes a backseat to strategy, and every glance, every word, becomes a calculated move in the relentless game of Renaissance politics. The stage is prepared, the players already cast, each bound by birth, ambition, and duty. In the heart of Rome, under the gaze of both men and gods, Lucrezia Borgia steps into a new chapter, one not marked by romance, but by the heavy weight of legacy and power. The city itself, a crucible of human drama, braces for the unfolding tale where personal lives entwine with political necessity, and where this wedding day is merely the first act in a saga that will reverberate across history. At the center of this spectacle stand Lucrezia and Alfonso, not merely bride and groom, but living symbols of political maneuvering and personal consequence. Their union is carefully forged in the fires of power rather than affection. Within the palazzo, hushed conversations swirl, guests exchanging polite smiles while quietly weighing the implications. Every noble present knows this marriage will affect far more than the couple's private lives. Lucrezia, the daughter of the Pope, bears her family's notorious reputation with poise and guarded strength. At just 22, she has already endured the glare of public judgment. Her earlier marriages, clouded by scandal and tragedy, remain etched into her name, scars her family is eager to bury or disguise. Her first marriage to Giovanni Sforza collapsed in humiliation, annulled on claims of impotence and betrayal, a public disgrace that reverberated through Italy's courts. Her second, to Alfonso of Aragon, ended in sudden violence, his murder widely attributed to her own family's ruthless ambition. The shadow of his death lingers still. And now, as she prepares to wed Alfonso d'Este, her third husband, the pressure to present strength, legitimacy, and stability is overwhelming. Alfonso, heir to the Duchy of Ferrara, is himself no stranger to politics. Raised in a court famed for refinement and cunning, he recognizes that this union is as much a diplomatic contract as a personal bond. He knows well that binding himself to the Borgias could fortify his dynasty or entangle it in their deadly intrigues. His role is not only to claim a bride, but to navigate the treacherous waters of papal power with shrewdness and resolve. The specter of Lucrezia's past marriages looms heavily. The annulment of her union with Giovanni Sforza was orchestrated by Pope Alexander VI with brutal precision, cutting ties with a family no longer useful. The scandal of Sforza's alleged impotence stained Lucrezia's honor, and the whispers never truly faded. Her second marriage, though briefly passionate, ended with Alfonso of Aragon's assassination, widely believed to be ordered by her father himself. For Lucrezia, it was both a personal loss and a public scandal, further cementing her family's reputation for ruthless calculation. These shadows hang over her third marriage, coloring every look, every murmur at the feast. Now, as Alfonso d'Este takes her hand, the stakes are immense. The Este family knows too well the Borgia's notoriety and demand undeniable proof of the marriage's strength. The consummation must be witnessed, transforming a private moment into a public act, binding the alliance beyond question. In her private chambers, Lucrezia sits composed, attendants arranging her gown and dark hair with delicate precision. Yet beneath her serene expression lies a storm of thought. She knows this marriage is not hers alone. It is a performance, one that must prove her fidelity, her womanhood, and her ability to play her part as a political bride once more. Alfonso, too, feels the weight of expectation. As future duke, he understands his duty as not only political leadership, but the performance of rituals that guarantee alliances. The act of consummation, stripped of intimacy, becomes a necessity for both families, a spectacle that validates a union. Meanwhile, the feast continues. Goblets clash, nobles laugh, diplomats exchange pleasantries, but beneath the merriment lies unease. Behind their smiles, men whisper the Borgia's daring and ruthlessness. Some admire it, others distrust it. Many view the Este family's choice to align with Rome's most infamous dynasty as a dangerous gamble. Lucrezia's place in this tableau is complex. Her beauty and youth are undeniable, but they are shadowed by her family's legacy of betrayal and scandal. Yet, within her lies resilience, a sharp wit, and a quiet strength recognized by those who truly know her. She is no mere pawn, but a woman intent on navigating power with intelligence and charm. Already, whispers within Ferrara's court hint that she may rise beyond the role of political bride and carve a place as a duchess of real influence. This marriage is, above all, a crucible where the personal and political collide. For Lucrezia and Alfonso, private desire must yield to public necessity. The weight of history, heavy with scandal, ambition, and blood, presses upon them both. As the feast wanes, the laughter fades, and the night advances, anticipation sharpens. The consummation awaits, a moment as political as it is personal. What should be private is transformed into a spectacle, a demand of proof, binding not only two people but two families in an alliance that may yet alter the course of Italy's future. This obligation, imposed by the Este family's determination to suppress rumors and secure the alliance, reveals how deeply personal lives were sacrificed at the altar of political ambition. Lucrezia, burdened by her past and the ever-watchful eyes of court, approached the moment with a mix of resignation and quiet determination. She knew her role was to stand as a symbol of strength and unity, proof that the Borgia name could endure beyond scandal and tragedy. Alfonso, too, readied himself to perform his duty in this elaborate dance of power, setting aside personal vulnerability for the sake of obligation. Within this charged atmosphere, the story of Lucrezia Borgia and Alfonso d'Este transcended the private realm, evolving into a narrative of political maneuvering, family legacy, and the intricate interplay of power and identity. Their union embodied the cold pragmatism of Renaissance politics, where alliances were built not on passion, but on the harsh arithmetic of survival and dominance. Yet at the core of this arrangement, the two carried their own fears, ambitions, and fragile hopes, making their story as deeply human as it was historical. As dust settled over Rome, the grandeur of the day's festivities gave way to a ritual both intimate and unsettlingly public. The wedding night of Lucrezia Borgia and Alfonso d'Este was not a private consummation, but a spectacle staged before a carefully chosen circle of courtiers and clerics. This bizarre custom stripped marriage of its sacred intimacy, transforming it into a piece of political theater. The same palace walls that had echoed with music and laughter only hours before now stood in grim silence, bearing witness to an act cloaked in tension, expectation, and humiliation. In Renaissance society, where lineage defined power, inheritance, and alliances, proof of consummation could not be entrusted to private vows. It required public verification. The Este family, wary of the Borgia reputation and the scandals trailing Lucrezia, insisted on this disturbing requirement. It was a chilling reminder that intimacy bowed before political necessity, reduced to a performance under the gaze of witnesses. The chamber itself was stark, its velvet drapes and rich tapestries dimmed by flickering candlelight. Servants moved quietly, faces carefully neutral, treading the line between duty and discretion. Priests, summoned as impartial witnesses, took their places solemnly, cloaking the act of a nearer sanctity, even as it stripped it of humanity. The atmosphere was suffocating, the silence broken only by hushed whispers among the assembly. Lucrezia entered slowly, her composure visibly strained. The soft rustle of her gown offered little shield from the vulnerability she was about to face. Her dark eyes reflected sorrow, defiance, and resignation all at once. She knew every detail would be dissected and wielded against her family's name. Yet beneath that quiet anguish lay a core of steel, an understanding that survival meant enduring humiliation without breaking. Alfonso followed, his demeanor weighted with duty and unease. Though bound by family expectations, he too recognized the absurdity of the spectacle. Their eyes met briefly, a silent acknowledgment of the ordeal they were forced to share. The consummation itself was carried out with chilling precision. Priests and courtiers kept their eyes fixed on the couple as though legitimacy could be proven by sight alone. The act, grotesquely repeated 3 times, blurred the boundary between sacred intimacy and public spectacle until nothing remained but performance. For Lucrezia, it was a profound violation, a stripping away of privacy and dignity, reducing her body to an instrument of political validation. And yet, she endured with a quiet strength, masking turmoil with composure, a resilience forged in a world where power and survival were inseparable. The presence of priests lent a religious weight, sanctifying the ordeal as though divine approval could erase its cruelty. This intertwining of church and politics laid bare the Renaissance paradox. Even the most private human experiences were turned into tools of statecraft. Outside the chamber, gossip ignited. Courtiers and envoys speculated, their whispers feeding Rome's appetite for scandal. Instead of silencing doubt, the very act of public consummation fueled it, dragging Lucrezia's virtue and suitability into renewed debate. Yet she did not crumble. Rather than submit as a victim, she transformed the humiliation into endurance, wielding her youth and beauty as weapons in her struggle for influence. For Alfonso, too, the ritual was both obligation and declaration, his repeated participation a demonstration of masculine strength in service of dynastic continuity. The Este family demanded proof not only of consummation, but assurance that heirs would follow. The implications of this night reached far beyond the marriage bed. It was a declaration to rivals and allies alike that the Este Borgia alliance was binding, fertile, and unshakable. In an era where legitimacy determined the fate of dynasties, such a display was a shield against dissent. Yet the personal cost was immense, especially for Lucrezia, whose body became a contested arena of power, politics, and control. This night, bizarre and invasive, perfectly captured the brutal reality of Renaissance politics, where private lives were consumed by public duty and passion was reduced to performance. For Lucrezia, the consummation witnessed and verified was not a union of love, but an affirmation of survival. Despite the humiliation, Lucrezia's resilience was undeniable. What was intended to reduce her into nothing more than a political instrument instead became a crucible that hardened her strength. She endured not only for herself, but for the legacy she would shape within the Este court. The wedding night, an ordeal of intrusion and exposure, ultimately became a testament to her ability to maneuver through the merciless world she inhabited. As dawn broke and the witnesses finally departed, the silence that lingered in the chamber carried an unspoken acknowledgment. The act was complete, the alliance sealed in a manner that left no room for doubt. Yet beneath the surface, the tangled struggles of power, identity, and survival remained very much alive. This night, far from a private beginning, became a public proclamation, a moment where intimacy was sacrificed to politics, and where Lucrezia Borgia's resilience began carving a new path to the perilous landscape of Renaissance Italy. The Borgia name, whispered with both dread and admiration across the peninsula, was a mantle heavy with ambition and infamy. Their reputation for cunning, ruthlessness, and political maneuvering was not born of rumor, but of deliberate strategies that had carried them to the height of influence. In the labyrinthine corridors of the Vatican and across Italy's noble courts, the Borgias had secured a place as masters of intrigue. Every move scrutinized, every alliance both coveted and feared. Pope Alexander VI, born Rodrigo Borgia, was the chief architect of this formidable legacy. His papacy, dazzling in wealth and power, was equally shadowed by charges of simony, nepotism, and even poison. His vision was clear: to elevate his family above all rivals, weaving a network of power that stretched across Italy and beyond. Marriage was his sharpest weapon, an instrument to forge alliances, secure territories, and polish the Borgia name of a world where lineage was everything. Lucrezia, as one of his most visible pawns, embodied this fusion of family ambition and personal sacrifice. Her marriages were never rooted in affection but in calculation, each alliance another move in a larger game of dominance. The dissolution of her first union to Giovanni Sforza was orchestrated with ruthless precision, discarding a family no longer politically useful. The Pope weaponized scandal, accusing Sforza of impotence, not only annulling the marriage but humiliating his former son-in-law in the process. Though effective, the maneuver left Lucrezia's reputation scarred, a burden she would carry into every union thereafter. Her second marriage, to Alfonso of Aragon, aimed to anchor Borgia influence in Naples, but ended in blood and suspicion. Alfonso's murder, widely believed to be sanctioned by the Pope himself, laid bare the lengths to which the Borgias would go to secure power. For Lucrezia, these events were deeply personal, yet inseparable from the cold political calculus governing her life. Each marriage was a thread in the grand tapestry of Borgia's strategy, woven with ambition and shadowed by peril. Her eventual union with Alfonso d'Este was yet another masterstroke. The Este family, rulers of Ferrara, commanded prestige, noble lineage, and a court famed for its cultural brilliance. The match promised mutual gain. The Este would win papal favor, while the Borgias extended their reach into northern Italy, building a web of loyalty strong enough to weather the storms of politics. Yet suspicion lingered. The Este, wary of the Borgia reputation, demanded assurances that the marriage would be both legitimate and enduring. Within this climate, the public consummation assumed extraordinary importance. No mere ritual, it was a political performance intended to silence scandal and secure the alliance. The Este family's insistence on witnesses may have been grotesque, but reflected a harsh necessity, a way to eliminate any doubt about the union's validity or Lucrezia's role as wife and future mother. Stripped of privacy, the consummation became a performance, a symbol of the Renaissance reality where personal lives bowed to political aims. For the Borgias, marriage was an extension of strategy, relationships to be shaped, discarded, or exploited as circumstances demanded. And while Lucrezia is often painted as a pawn, she was also an active player. Her intelligence and adaptability gave her tools to survive, even within the suffocating grip of her family schemes. Each alliance she entered was not merely a contract, but a battlefield where influence was fought over and defined. The scandals of her past unions did not deter Pope Alexander VI. Instead, they fueled his urgency to secure legitimacy through the Este marriage. The stakes were enormous. The Borgias faced fierce rivals eager to undermine their hold, while the papal state itself remained fragile, exposed to rebellion and foreign threat. This union was more than matrimony. It was a declaration of resilience, a statement that the Borgia name, though stained by infamy, was still unyielding. Within the Este court, Lucrezia's arrival was met with curiosity, suspicion, and guarded hope. Ferrara's refined atmosphere of music, art, and learning stood in stark contrast to the violence and scandal of Rome. Here, she had a chance to rebuild, to fashion a new identity beyond the shadow of her family sins. Yet the past clung tightly. Whispers of scandal followed her everywhere, and the need to prove loyalty and virtue pressed down with relentless weight. Her place within the Borgia family had always been precarious. Pope Alexander's towering ambition created both opportunity and peril, while her brothers, Cesare and Juan, were powerful, unpredictable forces, their rivalries spilling into violence. As daughter and sister in this volatile mix, Lucrezia had to balance obedience, cunning, and survival. Her marriages were never about happiness, but about carving out space in a family that thrived on both charisma and fear. The Este's demand for a public consummation reflected these dynamics writ large. It was a means to assert control, to ensure allegiance, and to anchor Lucrezia publicly to her role. This intrusion into the private realm was the starkest proof that for the Borgias, personal life was inseparable from politics. The consummation was not a rite of intimacy, but a display of authority, a performance proving that the Borgia name was not only enduring but adaptable. In this light, Lucrezia Borgia's marriage to Alfonso d'Este was more than a joining of two people. It was a strategic pact forged in the crucible of Renaissance ambition and intrigue. It captured the essence of an age where identity was consumed by politics and where love, duty, and survival blurred beyond recognition. The Borgia legacy, marked by both scandal and triumph, became the stage on which Lucrezia transformed from pawn into a woman of resilience and influence within the court of Ferrara. The consummation of her marriage was no private moment. It was a political spectacle, staged to silence whispers and fortify bonds. Its grotesque repetition, witnessed 3 times, served as a public guarantee that this alliance was real, binding, and fertile. What should have been private was made performance, a ritual where power, faith, and survival converged in the gaze of priests and courtiers alike. The witnesses, an austere gathering of nobles and clergymen, watched in silence, their stern eyes fixed upon a scene both intimate and invasive. Their presence underscored a harsh truth. In the ruthless theater of Renaissance politics, trust was fragile, and proof had to be furnished in the most intrusive ways. What was ordinarily hidden within the sanctity of privacy and tenderness was here stripped bare, reduced to physical evidence of union, devoid of warmth or discretion. Yet when the first act ended, the tension did not ease. Instead, a demand for 2 further repetitions revealed the depth of the Este family's resolve to crush every whisper that might question the alliance. Each renewed act was less about passion than about proof, a ritualistic declaration that the marriage was valid, binding, and fertile. This grotesque performance was meant not for intimacy, but for certainty, a spectacle to safeguard fragile trust between 2 great houses. For Lucrezia, the ordeal was a violation that cut deeply into her dignity. To have her body observed, her most private moments displayed for judgment, was a humiliation few could endure with such composure. Yet she did not falter. Hardened by years of scandal and the crushing weight of family ambition, she bore the ritual as an act of endurance, transforming shame into a quiet form of defiance. Each repetition carved resilience into her being, turning humiliation into an emblem of strength. Alfonso's role was no less heavy. As heir to Ferrara, he too was bound to prove the union, not only with words, but with physical testimony. The repeated consummations became a declaration of his virility and his loyalty to duty, a performance proclaiming him husband, heir, and future duke. Yet beneath the mask of obligation lay an unspoken recognition of the absurd cruelty demanded of them both, the knowledge that even the most private of human acts had been conscripted into the service of power. The witnesses themselves bore a burden of complicity. Their presence gave the ritual its stamp of legitimacy, making them guardians of political necessity disguised as marital proof. Priests charged with tending to souls found themselves endorsing a spectacle that blurred the line between holy sacrament and cold calculation. In their vows of observation, churchly oaths entwined with worldly ambition, illustrating the uneasy dance between sacred faith and secular power in Renaissance Italy. The insistence on 3 acts was no accident. In an age when rumor could fracture dynasties, thorough proof was deemed essential. The number 3, heavy with religious symbolism, lent a veneer of sanctity to what was otherwise a brutal demand. It left no room for doubt, no space for whispers of impotence or fraud to grow. Beyond the chamber, word of the ritual spread. Diplomats and courtiers dissected its implications, their gossip weaving the Borgia name further into scandal even as the act itself silenced the most dangerous accusations. In this paradox, humiliation became leverage. Intimacy was barter for advantage. The Este family secured their alliance, the Borgias their legitimacy. The night's ordeal was hailed as a triumph. It broadcast to rival houses that their pact was sealed with indisputable evidence, a warning that neither dynasty could be challenged on grounds of deception. Though humiliating, The ritual was wielded as a weapon of power, a symbol of Este's vigilance and of Lucrezia's resilience. For Lucrezia, it was a crucible. Publicly stripped of dignity, she emerged with strength forged in fire. What might have crushed another became her test of endurance, proof of her ability to master humiliation and transmute it into authority. From this night onward, she would no longer be seen only as a pawn in her family's schemes, but as a woman capable of navigating and bending the brutal demands of her time. Alfonso, too, found the ritual a confirmation of his role, not merely as husband, but as a dynastic pillar. His participation proclaimed him both virile and loyal, securing the continuity of Ferrara's line. This was more than a marital act. It was a public assertion of strength, a performance of masculinity and duty witnessed and recorded. Thus, what should have been private became theater. In this world, intimacy was political, and marriage was no union of hearts but a contract to be proven, defended, and displayed. Yet within this grim theater, Lucrezia's spirit endured. What was meant to degrade her, instead, tempered her into steel. The ritual did not break her, it marked her transformation. In the days and months that followed, the Duchess began to shed the shadow of scandal. What had begun as a shameful spectacle became the foundation of a new identity, one of resilience, intelligence, and influence. No longer simply the Pope's daughter, she began to be recognized as a duchess in her own right, a figure of command within Ferrara's elegant and treacherous court. The city offered her a stage unlike Rome's turbulence. Here, among poets, scholars, and artists, she carved out a space for herself. She turned scandal into sophistication, hosting salons where culture mingled with politics, forging alliances through wit, grace, and calculated charm. Her patronage of the arts reinforced the Este legacy, recasting her name in the language of refinement rather than infamy. Through diplomacy, correspondence, and the bonds of motherhood, she further secured her place. Each child she bore strengthened the dynasty, while each letter she wrote shaped policy and mediated conflict. The Duchess, once dismissed as a pawn, grew into a player, a woman who had not only survived the cruelest stage of Renaissance politics, but who now knew how to command it. The children she bore stood as living emblems of the alliance between two great dynasties, tangible proof of its endurance and success. Yet beneath this public triumph, Lucrezia carried the weight of her past. The betrayals, humiliations, and scars of earlier marriages were memories time could not fully erase. Her resilience did not come from forgetting, but from confronting those wounds, transforming her vulnerability into strength. What had once been turned against her, the most intimate parts of her life, became a wellspring of empowerment as she reclaimed her story and reshaped her place at court. This duality, public authority balanced against private struggle, gave Lucrezia's character its depth. She was a woman molded by the harsh realities of Renaissance politics, yet able to rise above them through intellect and willpower. Her presence defied simple labels of victimhood, revealing instead a figure who actively steered her destiny within the limits imposed on her. From a bride under harsh scrutiny, she evolved into a duchess of influence, her adaptability and inner strength undeniable. The Este court itself recognized this transformation. Increasingly, she was valued not merely as a symbol of an alliance, but as a diplomatic and cultural force in her own right. Her patronage drew scholars, artists, and poets to Ferrara, enhancing its reputation as a beacon of Renaissance culture. In her salons, conversation and art wove together political strategy and intellectual exchange, making her gatherings both refined and politically potent. Through these activities, Lucrezia anchored herself at the heart of courtly life, weaving networks of influence that reached beyond Ferrara's walls. Alfonso d'Este, her husband, played a complementary role. As heir and later duke, he carried out the duties of rule, but the support of Lucrezia's ventures helped secure her position. Over time, their marriage shifted from a union of necessity to a partnership defined by shared goals and respect. This evolving dynamic expanded her authority, reinforcing her influence within the court and beyond. Her rising stature carried implications greater than her own survival. As whispers of scandal faded, replaced by admiration for her wit, patronage, and diplomacy, Lucrezia became a model of Renaissance womanhood, cultured, educated, and politically engaged. Her life challenged the narrow expectations of her era, showing how women could claim agency in a society dominated by men. In Ferrara's crucible of intrigue, she proved that endurance, intelligence, and grace could carve a space for power. The humiliations of her wedding night and the shadows of past marriages no longer defined her. They became the forge in which her strength was tempered. She emerged not as a passive victim, but as a duchess who commanded respect, shaped policy, and elevated the cultural and political life of her adopted city. Through diplomacy, salons, and motherhood, Lucrezia transcended the limits of her birth and past, rewriting her story and, in doing so, reshaping the legacy of her family. Her influence within Ferrara blended culture with politics. She understood that in Renaissance Italy, true power came not only from armies or bloodlines, but also from the arts, intellect, and diplomacy. Her salons, glittering gatherings of poets, philosophers, artists, and envoys, became crucibles where culture and politics mingled seamlessly. Here she projected refinement and command, engaging in lively debates, guiding conversations, and earning admiration for her wit and intelligence. Within these circles, the whispers of her past grew faint, replaced by her embodiment of Renaissance humanism. Her patronage was deliberate and strategic. Commissioned works celebrated the Este family's heritage while linking her name to Ferrara's cultural rise. Paintings, sculptures, and music flourished under her support, each creation serving both as art and as a statement of legitimacy. Through these acts, she demonstrated that influence could be secured as much through beauty and culture as through political maneuver. By hosting salons and patronizing scholars, she created webs of loyalty and respect that reached far beyond Ferrara's palaces. Diplomats and nobles were drawn into her cultural orbit, where art and politics intertwined. In this refined setting, she elevated Ferrara's prestige while also bolstering her own standing as duchess. Her influence was not confined to culture alone. Letters and negotiations reveal a woman deeply engaged in the shifting tides of Renaissance diplomacy. She understood the delicate balances between rival states and used her position to secure advantages for Ferrara and her allies. By blending cultural diplomacy with political strategy, she reinforced her place as an active agent in Italian power struggles. Even her salons became subtle theaters of negotiation, offering her a form of soft power denied to most women of her time. Within them, she shaped opinion, cultivated alliances, and steered discourse, wielding indirect yet effective authority. In this way, she turned the constraints of gender into avenues of influence, transforming potential weaknesses into enduring strengths. Her motherhood also tied into this broader vision. The children she raised became embodiments not only of dynastic continuity, but the union of Este and Borgia legacies. Their education reflected the same values she championed in her salons, ensuring that her influence extended into the future. Yet beneath this brilliance, Lucrezia remained acutely aware of the precariousness of her role. Court life thrived on envy, rivalry, and shifting allegiances. The very culture she cultivated could both elevate and endanger her. To survive, she relied on constant vigilance, sharp intelligence, and careful balance. Her journey, from scandal's shadow to celebrated duchess, reflected the essence of the Renaissance itself, a fusion of politics, culture, and reinvention. Her salons became legendary, attracting poets like Tasso and painters like Dasso Dassi, whose works immortalized the sophistication she had nurtured. Through her patronage, Ferrara's prestige rose, and her own name became intertwined with its cultural glory. Her reach extended beyond Ferrara. Correspondence with Italian and European courts placed her in the broader web of Renaissance power. She skillfully used culture as a diplomatic tool, complementing negotiations with a subtle persuasion of art and refinement. In this, her influence was holistic, shaping both politics and culture, ensuring that her mark on Ferrara would outlast scandal and endure as a legacy of brilliance. The blending of culture and politics under Lucrezia's influence reshaped Ferrara into a new identity. The court turned into a shining emblem of Renaissance ideals, where humanist learning and artistic brilliance thrived side by side with political maneuvering. Lucrezia's presence challenged the age-old assumptions about women's power, showing that influence could be exercised through intellect, taste, and patronage just as forcefully as through birthright or military might. Within this flourishing atmosphere, Lucrezia Borgia redefined her own story while expanding the possibilities for women of her age. Her salons became arenas of strategy where culture served as a weapon for political leverage and personal authority. Through this, she secured a lasting legacy in Ferrara's history, embodying the delicate balance of art, diplomacy, and power that marked her era. As the years passed inside the gilded halls of Ferrara's court, Lucrezia's life grew into a mosaic of victories and hardships. Her public image reflected a careful balance of authority and fragility. Once whispered about as a scandal-ridden duchess, she evolved into a woman carrying both the heavy weight and the rare privilege of her station. Behind the splendor of her patronage and diplomacy was a woman constantly negotiating between personal trials and political obligations. As duchess, she lived multiple lives at once: wife, mother, patroness, and strategist, each role demanding delicate skill in navigating intrigue and external threats. Her children symbolized dynastic security and were celebrated not only as blessings, but as political milestones affirming the Borgia-Zestas alliance. These births, however, also heightened the scrutiny she endured, reinforcing the pressure on her shoulders. Yet motherhood gave her strength as well as joy. Lucrezia poured herself into shaping their education, embedding them with the humanist ideals she cherished. Through them, she sought to extend her influence into the future, molding heirs who would embody the principles of her rule. Still, her life was never free of shadows. The humiliations of her past, the betrayals, the scars of scandal, and the tragedies of lost husbands and children lingered. Enemies at court used every chance to remind her that power was fragile and rivals always near. Ferrara itself was no safe haven, for loyalty was fleeting and politics ruthless. Alongside Alfonso Guest, she confronted both domestic and foreign threats, their marriage maturing from a strategic pact into a partnership of mutual respect. Even so, the unrelenting expectations of producing heirs and upholding family honor tested their bond. Through it all, her patronage of art and culture remained a defining strength. Ferrara blossomed into a hub of music, painting, and intellectual exchange, giving the city prestige while reinforcing Lucrezia's authority. Her cultural sponsorship acted as a subtle form of political power, complementing her diplomacy and securing her influence. Yet this very visibility that made her powerful also invited endless scrutiny. Her private struggles became court gossip, and her every choice was weighed as both personal act and political maneuver. Illness, childbirth, and loss repeatedly tested her resilience. In an age when life was fragile, death struck often and brutally. Children, relatives, even allies were taken, each loss carving deep wounds that reverberated through her household and her court. On top of this, she constantly wrestled with divided loyalties between her infamous Borgia's bloodline and her adopted home in Ferrara. She tried to distance herself from the darker stains of her family's reputation, but shadows remained. In response, she carefully built an image of dignity and grace. Beyond being a patroness of the arts, she supported charity and public causes, acts that not only expressed compassion, but also strategically bound her more closely to her people. Over time, the marriage bed, once a stage of humiliating public consummation, transformed into a symbol of her acclaimed authority, an arena she reshaped on her own terms. Lucrezia's story became the embodiment of the Renaissance woman's paradox: powerful yet vulnerable, confined by family legacy yet constantly reshaping her fate. Her life was a mixture of triumph and tragedy, public glory and private pain, creating a complex figure who endured and adapted within a hostile world. Her legacy was not pure nor unblemished. It was stitched together from patronage, diplomacy, sacrifice, and resilience. In Ferrara, Lucrezia Borgia became far more than a pawn of dynastic politics. She emerged as a duchess of substance whose choices shaped her era. With time, history remembered her less as the scandalous daughter of Pope Alexander VI and more as a woman of formidable will, diplomacy, and cultural influence. What once seemed like ruin and disgrace became the foundation of a transformed legacy, proving that even in an age ruled by dynasties and ruthless power, one woman could reclaim her story and leave her mark on history. Her letters reveal a woman deeply engaged in the machinery of power, using her position as a bridge between her papal birth family and the noble Este dynasty she married into. Through careful negotiation and alliance building, She secured for herself a place in the political world, a realm where women were usually sidelined. Yet her story is full of contradictions. Lucrezia never escaped the weight of the Borgia name, a lineage tied as much to ambition and ruthlessness as to faith and patronage. She lived at the intersection of two identities, the infamous daughter of Rome's papal house and the Duchess of Ferrara. This duality created a life of tension, but also of opportunity, for her family's notoriety gave her access to influence that would otherwise have been out of reach. The personal cost of her public role was immense. She carried the burdens of court intrigue, motherhood, and political duty with a poise that concealed her private struggles. Her marriages, while strategic in design, became key turning points in her personal journey, threads of loss, survival, and transformation woven into her identity. What began as humiliation, especially the forced public consummation with Alfonso d'Este, slowly transformed into a story of endurance and, ultimately, of power reclaimed. In Ferrara, Lucrezia's patronage went far beyond art for art's sake. It became a tool of identity and authority. The painters, poets, and thinkers she supported elevated the city's prestige and cemented her own position within it. Her salons doubled as centers of culture and arenas of diplomacy, where gender barriers were bent if not broken. Through these gatherings, she exercised an influence that rivaled the reach of men in power, proving that intellect and patronage could shape politics as surely as armies and titles. Motherhood added another dimension to her legacy. Her children with Alfonso d'Este were not only heirs to a dynasty, but living symbols of the alliance between two powerful houses. By guiding their education and arranging their marriages, she extended her reach into the next generation, ensuring that her influence would echo far beyond her own lifetime. Her maternal devotion was inseparable from her political ambition, blending family with statecraft. Over time, the lurid gossip that had once surrounded her reputation gave way to a more nuanced understanding. Chroniclers and historians began to see the depth of her resilience, her sophistication in politics, and the lasting impact of her cultural vision. She emerged as a figure who embodied the complexities of the Renaissance, a woman navigating the tangled worlds of power, gender, and family with rare skill. Her story illustrates the power of resilience to turn shame into strength. The scandals, betrayals, and humiliation she endured became stepping stones toward legitimacy and sovereignty. She ceased to be a pawn and rose as a duchess who wielded cultural and diplomatic power with intelligence and grace. The flourishing of Ferrara's court, enriched by her patronage, remains a monument to her vision. Lucrezia's journey resists simple labels. She was both victim and victor, scandalized yet celebrated, constrained but commanding. Her transformation from the shadows of humiliation to the heights of influence reveals how survival itself could become a form of power in the Renaissance world. It is a tale where the personal and political fuse into one, and where a woman's agency reshaped her destiny. Ultimately, her life invites us to reconsider the balance of gender, power, and legacy. It reminds us that even in the most restrictive conditions, dignity can be reclaimed and history rewritten. In Ferrara's palaces and in the chronicles of her time, Lucrezia's voice endures, a testament to the spirit of a woman who turned scandal into sovereignty and left an indelible mark on Renaissance history.